It happened at the end of a Sunday dinner. The kind where the food is good enough to distract from the tension, but not good enough to mask it completely. My husband and I had just finished clearing the table when his mother, who'd been unusually quiet all evening, stood up and said she had something for me. She left the room without another word, and when she came back, she was holding a small wooden box, old, polished, heavy in a way that told you it mattered. She placed it on the table in front of me like she was handing over a casserole, not a family artifact. "It's from Grandma's things," she said, voice clipped, eyes not quite meeting mine. "She wanted you to have it." I looked down at the box. There was a little brass lock on the front. No key. Did she say what was inside? I asked, half smiling to hide my confusion. She shrugged. "No idea. We found it in the bottom of a drawer. Figured if it had your name on it, you should deal with it." The tone was too casual, too dismissive. Like she wanted to move on before I could ask more. My husband said nothing. Just stood behind her, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Thank you," I said, unsure of what else to do. She didn't respond. Just grabbed her purse and muttered something about needing to get back before dark. My husband followed her out. I stayed behind for a minute, staring at the box, suddenly alone at the table with something that felt like a riddle. When we got home, I placed it on the nightstand in our bedroom. The box was maybe 8 inches wide, solid wood, corners worn smooth by time. No scratches. No markings. Just the lock, old and tarnished. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, but it was sealed tight. No hidden hinges. No false bottom. It was locked, in every sense. I asked my husband about it that night, just before bed. "Did your grandma ever mention leaving me anything?" I asked. He didn't look up from his phone. "Not that I remember." "She was always kind to me," I said, softly. "Maybe it was something personal." "Maybe," he said. Then rolled over. That was it. No curiosity. No warmth. Just a wall. Over the next few days, I thought about the box more than I expected. I'd walk past it, stare for a second too long. I even tried to open it with a bobby pin once, like some amateur spy. Nothing worked. And the longer it stayed shut, the more it started to feel like it wasn't meant to be opened. At least, not by me. Not now. I asked my mother-in-law a second time, this time over the phone. "Do you have the key?" I asked. She paused. "No. We didn't find one." "Did she leave any notes about it?" "No." Something in her tone was different this time. Shorter. Like the very act of me asking again was irritating. Like I should have taken the box and moved on. That's when I started to wonder, not what was inside, but why now. Grandma had been gone for 8 months. Why hadn't I been given the box earlier? And why hand it to me on a random Sunday night with no explanation? That question stayed with me until Friday, when I took it to a local locksmith. Just a tiny place near the post office. The guy took one look and said it wouldn't take long. 10 minutes later, the lock clicked open. I took a deep breath and opened the lid. And what I saw inside changed everything. The locksmith didn't peek. He slid the box back across the counter like it was just another job, and maybe for him, it was. But for me, even before I touched it again, I could feel the weight of it had changed. I carried it out to the car with both hands, careful, like it might break, not the wood, but the silence that had settled around it. I didn't open it there. I didn't even look at it again until I got home, and even then, I waited until my husband had gone out for groceries. Only when the house was completely quiet, only when I could hear nothing but the low hum of the fridge and the dull ticking of the wall clock, did I open the lid. Inside, the first thing I noticed was a folded piece of thick paper. A letter. Old, yellowing slightly at the edges, sealed with a small wax stamp that had long since faded. I set it aside for a moment. Underneath was a stack of other papers, official-looking, maybe legal. And beneath those, a small black and white photo. I picked it up carefully, holding it by the corners. It was a picture of Grandma, younger than I'd ever seen her. Maybe in her 40s. She stood outside a cabin near a lake, hand resting gently on the shoulder of a child, not a toddler, more like 8 or 9, hair wild, eyes squinting into the sun. The strange thing was, I didn't recognize the child. Not my husband, not his cousins. Someone else. I set the photo down slowly and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was delicate but firm. And it started with my name. To the one I always saw as family, even when others didn't. I sat back, stunned. This wasn't some generic farewell. This was for me. I kept reading. You were the only one who ever listened to me without talking over me. The only one who helped me with things without asking what was in it for you. You reminded me of myself when I was younger, quieter, but not weak. And maybe that's why I trusted you with this. I blinked hard. The words swam for a second, blurry with memory. This box was kept from the others for a reason. What's inside is yours, not because you asked for it, but because you never asked for anything. If they ever give it to you, it means they believe it's no longer dangerous. But you'll know what to do when the time comes. My hands went cold. Dangerous? What had they been hiding? I looked back into the box and reached for the documents beneath the letter. Legal pages. Property-related. I saw parcel numbers, coordinates, and handwritten notes in the margins. Then, halfway down the stack, I saw the word, title transfer. And next to it, my name. In Grandma's handwriting. It wasn't just sentimental. This was ownership. I flipped to the next page. A sketch of a plot near the lake. The same lake from the photograph. A small hand-drawn X marked one corner. Below it, cabin and surrounding land to remain in her name, not to be transferred under pressure or revised without consent. My name was written again. Underlined. The next page was a photocopy of an earlier will. Dated years before the one I'd seen at the reading after Grandma passed. This version didn't divide everything between the sons and daughters-in-law. It was different. It named me, specifically, as the sole heir to a lakeside property. And the will I remembered? Didn't mention it at all. That property had been sold 2 months ago. By my husband. With his mother's help. And now, the locked box suddenly made sense. They gave it to me after the sale, when they thought nothing could be undone. When they thought the past couldn't come back. But I had the letter. The map. The will. And it was all still signed. I didn't say anything that night. My husband came home, made small talk about long lines at the store, and kissed me on the cheek like he always did. I nodded, smiled, went through the motions. But in my chest, something had shifted. I felt it, not like a burst of anger, but like a slow unwinding. Like a rope, too long pulled tight, finally beginning to fray. The box stayed in the closet, tucked behind my old scarves, hidden in plain sight. I didn't want to touch it again until I knew what I was looking for. So the next morning, while my husband was out at work, I took the stack of documents and started reading again, this time slowly, carefully, like someone looking for patterns they didn't want to believe. And there they were. The original title transfer was dated 6 years ago, signed by Grandma, notarized, witnessed. It was real. I held it in my hands. The name on the deed, mine. Clear as day. Then came a gap. A blank space in the paper trail. Nothing until 2 months ago, when the property was sold, quietly, to a couple who planned to tear down the old cabin and build something new. But here's the problem. That land was never theirs to sell. Legally, it had been mine for years. Grandma had transferred it to me. She just never told anyone but left it tucked away in that locked box. And when she died, when her health was failing and things were being shuffled by my in-laws, that version of the will, the one that named me, was left out. Or hidden. I kept reading. There were notes written in the margins of the letter she left, scribbled in what looked like haste. "Don't trust Margaret to handle this fairly," one line read. "If she finds the box first, she'll bury it. Margaret, my mother-in-law." Another, "Make sure she gets it. Only her. Only her." But they didn't give it to me after the funeral. Not after the house was cleared out. Not even during the legal meetings. They gave it to me months later. Once the deal had gone through. Once the land was gone. As if they were certain it no longer mattered. As if handing me a locked box now, with no key, no explanation, would erase the fact that they had stripped me of what was mine and buried the evidence behind a smile and a silent nod. They thought they were safe. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't dig. That night, I lay awake in bed next to the man I thought I knew, wondering how much he knew. Wondering if this had been his idea, or hers, or both. Wondering if that cabin had ever meant anything to him, the one where his grandmother had taken him fishing as a boy, the one he said was too old to bother with, just months before he signed it away. I stared at the ceiling and felt every inch of distance between us. Not from the property, but from the truth. He'd crossed a line, and he didn't even look back to see if I was behind him. He'd stood beside his mother, nodded along, and watched my name disappear from the story without a word. But I had the documents now. And I knew what they meant. The next morning, I didn't make breakfast. I didn't clean up his coffee cup. I drove straight to a real estate lawyer's office. Sat down in the waiting room with the box in my lap like it was a beating heart. When they called my name, I stood tall. I had something stronger than anger now. Something that couldn't be bought or buried. I had proof. And I was ready to use it. The lawyer's office was small, almost plain, 2 leather chairs, a muted rug, and a row of thick binders lined up behind glass. The receptionist didn't ask questions, just handed me a form and offered water. I declined both. My hands were too busy gripping the edges of the wooden box I had brought with me. It sat in my lap like an anchor, and for once, I was grateful for its weight. It kept me from shaking. When my name was called, I walked in and met a woman in her mid-40s, glasses perched low, sleeves rolled up, the kind of face that looked like it had read more fine print than most people see in a lifetime. Her name was Ellen. She didn't offer small talk, just asked me to sit and gestured to the documents I brought. I laid everything out in front of her, slowly, the original will, the title transfer, the photo, and finally, the letter. She took her time, reading each page in silence, eyes narrowing with each pass. At one point, she took out a highlighter and began circling dates. When she finished, she sat back and folded her hands. "Well," she said, "this is going to be very uncomfortable for them." She explained things carefully, like she was guiding me down a hallway filled with legal tripwires. The short version? The title transfer Grandma signed years ago was legally binding. It didn't matter that it had been informal. It had been notarized and signed, with witnesses. That made it enforceable. In fact, the land had become mine the moment that paper was completed. Even if Grandma had written a new will afterward, she couldn't have reassigned what was no longer hers. The cabin, the land, everything tied to that parcel, was mine and had been for years. And selling it? Illegal. Whoever sold that property, Ellen said, either didn't check the actual title history, or assumed no one else would. I told her I was certain they checked. She nodded once, slowly. Then they gambled you'd never find this. She asked if I knew who handled the sale. I gave her the name, a firm my husband had mentioned once, casually, as if it had been routine. She jotted it down, then asked if I had ever signed anything. I said no. Not once. She leaned back in her chair. Then we have leverage. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just stared at the edge of the desk, letting the reality settle over me. I hadn't made it up. I wasn't imagining things. I hadn't been overreacting. They really had tried to erase me, and now, with a few pages and a stamp, I was erasing their certainty instead. What are my options? I asked quietly. She looked at me squarely. You can pursue civil action to reclaim ownership. Depending on what's been done to the land, you could seek financial damages as well. But the biggest card you're holding, she said, tapping the title transfer, is that this document was never mentioned. Never submitted. That's concealment, at best. And at worst? I asked. At worst, she said, it's fraud. The word landed heavily, but not painfully. More like a bell finally being rung after years of silence. I nodded slowly. I want to move forward. She didn't smile, but there was something approving in her eyes. A flicker of respect. Not for the documents, but for me. By the time I got home that evening, the house felt colder. My husband was watching TV, acting like nothing had shifted, like everything was still balanced in his favor. I sat across from him and didn't say a word. Because silence, when it holds evidence, is far louder than any argument. The storm hadn't hit yet. But the clouds were gathering, and I was finally the one writing the forecast. I didn't mention the lawyer for 3 days. I wanted the silence to marinate. I wanted to see if any guilt would surface on its own. If the man I had built a life with, the man who once held my hand at a funeral and whispered, "She really loved you," would come clean about what he'd helped cover up. He didn't. He still kissed my forehead before bed. Still asked what I wanted from the grocery store. Still watched sitcoms like the world hadn't shifted. So I waited until Thursday evening. We had just finished dinner, pasta, the kind I made when I didn't want to cook but didn't want to be accused of giving up either. He was rinsing his plate when I said it. I saw a lawyer. He paused. Not dramatically. Just enough to tell me the words landed where they were supposed to. Then he set the plate down and turned around slowly. About what? The box. The land. The will Grandma left with my name on it. The notarized title transfer with a date years before the sale. He said nothing for a moment. Then he let out a short, almost amused exhale. You're serious? Dead serious. He ran a hand over his mouth, pacing once between the counter and the sink. That wasn't even, she never said anything to anyone about giving you land. She said it to me, I replied, meeting his eyes. In writing. In her own words. In a letter she left sealed in a locked box your mother waited 8 months to hand over. His lips tightened. I saw his jaw twitch. Not in panic, in calculation. He wasn't shocked. He was adjusting. You know how much that land was worth, he said. There it was. Not denial. Just greed in plain speech. I do, I said calmly. And I know it was sold without the actual owner's consent. That's fraud. Your lawyer would have known that if he checked the title thoroughly. But I'm guessing someone told him not to. His hands hit the counter hard. So what, you're going to sue your own husband? I didn't flinch. No. I'm going to reclaim what was mine. If that includes a lawsuit, so be it. Grandma trusted me with something, and you buried it. She never even talked to me about that cabin, he said, shaking his head. She didn't have to. It wasn't for you. He stared at me for a long time. Then he laughed bitterly. You don't know what this will do to the family. I think I do. But I also know what it's already done to me. He left the room, muttering something under his breath. I didn't follow. I stayed where I was, hands folded, calm. There was no storm left in me. Just a steady wind of certainty that refused to bend anymore. The next morning, I received an email from the lawyer. She'd drafted a formal claim to contest the property's sale and freeze any further development until ownership was resolved. I signed it within the hour. By Friday night, my mother-in-law called. No greeting. Just a cold question, "What are you doing?" I answered without hesitation. Fulfilling Grandma's last request. She scoffed. That box was never supposed to reach you. I figured. She didn't know what she was doing. That cabin was falling apart. But she still gave it to me. And you knew that. A pause. Just long enough to feel her nerves catching up to her pride. You're going to tear this family apart. No, I said. You did that. I'm just opening the box you tried to keep shut. The letter was sent out Monday morning. Certified, with attachments, the original title transfer, the notarized copy, the handwritten letter, and a statement from my attorney. The recipients? The buyers, the law firm that handled the illegal sale, and, of course, my husband and mother-in-law. I wasn't trying to make noise. I was making things right. And right doesn't always scream, it just refuses to lie down. What followed wasn't fireworks. No dramatic courtroom showdowns or screaming matches on the porch. It was quieter than that, more precise. The development deal on the cabin land stalled within a week. The buyers pulled out. No one wanted to be tangled in a title dispute with a valid prior deed in someone else's name. Not when there were receipts. Not when there was handwriting. Not when everything lined up too perfectly to ignore. My lawyer said they'd try to settle. They'll want to avoid court, she said. They'll pretend it's about preserving family peace. It's not. It's about avoiding exposure. I nodded. I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth to breathe again. My husband avoided me for days. He came home late, left early. The silence between us stretched into something unfamiliar. Not tense, but hollow. Like the framework of trust had already crumbled, and we were just walking around the ruins pretending not to see it. One night, I found him in the guest room, suitcase open. "Where are you going?" I asked. He didn't look up. "To my sister's. At least for a while." I didn't try to stop him. He'd already left, in all the ways that counted. What was left was just the body of the lie he helped carry. As he zipped up the bag, he said, almost bitterly, "You know, she only left it to you because she pitied you." I met his eyes calmly. "If that's what you need to believe to sleep at night, then go ahead. But Grandma knew who she could trust. And you proved her right." He left without another word. My lawyer called later that week. The opposing side had folded. Quietly, quickly. They agreed to void the sale and transfer the property title back to me. A small settlement was offered to the original buyers. No press. No drama. Just an agreement typed in quiet legal language acknowledging what had always been true. When I drove out to the lake a week later, the cabin was still standing. Run down, yes. Shingles missing. Paint flaking. But real. Still there. Just like I remembered it from the one time Grandma brought me there, years ago. She'd called it her thinking place. Now it was mine. I walked the edge of the property line, fingers trailing the tall weeds. I found the tree she'd once hung wind chimes from. I found the path to the dock, now worn, boards soft with time. And I felt no anger. Just presence. Just peace. In the distance, I saw an old swing swaying in the breeze. That night, I brought out the photo from the box, the one of Grandma with the child I still hadn't identified. I didn't need to. That picture wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes the quietest people carry the deepest truths. And sometimes, those truths are kept hidden until the right moment. Locked away not to hurt someone, but to protect something sacred. She trusted me. And now, standing on land that was almost erased from my life, I finally understood why. Because I didn't take what wasn't mine. I only took back what had been buried.